The great thing about making a compost bin is how few materials you need. Other than the usual suspects like kitchen scraps, brown materials like cardboard, dry leaves, grass clippings, coffee grinds, really all you need is a large enough bin to hold your green and brown materials, a way to make holes in the bin to provide aeration and drainage, a way to cover those holes to keep the critters out, and that's that. Let's see how we make it. To make a compost bin, you're going to want something that's fairly substantial. This is a 32-gallon plastic bin that I got from a big box retailer. Whatever you do, make sure that the bin that you get has a lid that is securely fitting. You're going to want to make sure that you can close the lid securely to let the compost do its work. The first thing you'll want to do is you want to lay the bin on its side. Laying it on its side helps you get the stability so you can do the next step, which is to make some holes. It might seem like the amount of holes I'm drilling is a little bit of overkill, but it's not, and I'll tell you why. You want constant airflow through your compost bin. If there's too much moisture and not enough air, what's going to happen is the aerobic bacteria are going to move out, the anaerobic bacteria will move in. The anaerobic bacteria, those are the ones that work in the cold. They work super slowly. They also off-gas methane and sulfur, which means that an anaerobic compost bin not only is going to take forever to break down, but it is also going to smell terrible. If you're worried about using plastic in your garden, that's okay. You can get a galvanized steel trash bin for just a little bit more. It's not too bad. It might be a little bit tougher to drill holes in, but it's certainly going to be sturdy and it's going to be long lasting. I don't have a problem generally with plastic because this bin is rated for the outdoors. It can handle the UV rays. It's heavy duty material that's not going to break down and likely will not leach anything into my compost. Add holes fairly liberally into your bin, and also remember to make holes on the bottom for water drainage. Proper drainage is key. You want to make sure that your compost has the ability to breathe and also isn't too wet. You want it to be like a wrung out sponge, not completely sopping. And there we go. 1 million or so holes drilled later, and now we have our compost bin with holes drilled for aeration and for drainage. Now all that's next is we need to reinforce this to keep the critters out. To keep our furry friends at bay from getting at your compost, you want to make sure that you're reinforcing it with something around the holes. Here I'm using mesh hardware cloth, but you can use anything that has small enough holes that lets air in, water out, and keeps out the pests. All I have to do to get this started is to get the mesh inside of the bin and then start to attach it. I'm using zip ties, but you can use metal wire, twist ties, whatever works for you. And now your bin is ready to be filled. But before you fill it, make sure you figure out where you want to put it. The bin shouldn't get too heavy because you're not going to overfill it. That would be a bad thing for the compost, but you want it to be in a generally sunny area of your garden and pretty much tucked away because you're not going to be using it super often while things are cooking. You might also want to consider building a few of these and having them scattered throughout your garden. That way you're not having to haul compost across your garden anytime you need it when your only bin is on the other side of the yard. Because I have my main compost pen here in the northeast corner of my backyard, I'm going to go ahead and locate my new bin basically on the opposite side of my garden. And once you find that perfect spot for your new compost bin, it takes a minimal amount of effort and time to prep the area. What you could do is you could take some bricks and you could set the bin on top of the bricks. Remember, we need good drainage. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take advantage of the fact that where I'm setting my bin is right here in a nice established part of my garden. It's tucked away in the corner, so it's not going to be overly disruptive, but it's in a great spot because it's close to several of my garden beds, and the soil here is nice and rich. So I'm actually going to dig this area out a little bit and install the bin an inch or two into the soil, cover it up, and what that'll do is it'll establish a relationship early on with the bin and the soil underneath it. That way the microbes and the earthworms in the soil will feel comfortable moving in. Dig into your designated area about 1 to 3 inches deep, a little bit larger than the diameter of your bin. Make sure that the drainage holes that you drilled into the bottom of the bin are also covered with a wire mesh, anything that's going to keep out unwanted creatures like vermin. Once the bin is in place, I'm actually going to take some of the native soil and dump it into the bottom of the bin. Again, establishing that relationship so the bin and the ground feel like they're one team. Once the bin is in place, simply just bury it an inch or two into the ground that you dug out. All that's left to do is fill it up with brown, green materials that are going to break down together and create wonderful, nutritious compost. And because it's fall, I have heaps of material that I've been saving for just this purpose. I can fill this bin with material straight from my fall garden cleanup. My last mow was yesterday. I saved the grass clippings. It's going to be a great nitrogen source for this. I'm also incorporating shredded cardboard and paper into the bin. That's a super carbon-rich material that's going to really help balance things out and provide for a great compost. Now is generally the time that I would water the bin, but we've had some rain recently and some of this material is already pretty wet, so I'm going to forego watering, but I am going to make sure I check the moisture levels over the next couple of weeks, just in case it needs a little bit more. And similarly to how I added some of the native soil to the very bottom of the bin before I started to fill it up, I'm going to top it off with some compost from my compost pen. It's going to introduce microbes into the mix and it's going to really get things moving. And I'm not done yet. This compost bin is only about halfway full. Now I'm not going to fill it all the way to the brim because we don't want it to get so heavy that it's forcing airflow out. We want to make sure that air is getting in, want to make sure that the aerobic bacteria are getting a chance to do their work. But I am going to continue to feed this over the course of the next few days, couple weeks. And I'm going to feed it primarily with things from the kitchen. My kitchen scraps, the rule is when we do meal prep, half goes into the freezer for future veggie stock. The other half, it's going in this bin. Same with our coffee. The coffee we drink every morning, once we're done, that and the filter itself, because it's compostable, it's going into this bin. When we drink tea, what we'll do is after it's steeped, we'll remove the leaves from the bag. And yes, put it in the compost. Now in my climate here, my 5B garden in northeastern Illinois, this bin is going to go dormant, and it's going to go dormant probably within the next month to 6 weeks. If you're in milder climates, you might actually find that this will continue to work. It'll continue to generate heat. It'll continue to grow and create compost throughout the winter season. But for me, I know that this is going to go dormant, which is why I want to continue to feed it now to give it a nice head start. Because as soon as spring arrives, I know that this is going to wake back up and it's going to already have a jump start on creating great, nutritious, wonderful compost that I'll be able to use in my garden all throughout the summer. I hope this inspired you to take a shot at building your own compost bin. Start it now and you won't regret it later.